Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. I am your host, John DeLynn. It's September 8th, 2022, and we are here in part two of our interview with Greg Gerritsen. Hey, Greg.
Hey.
Welcome back
Thanks.
to part two.
Thank you.
For those who don't know, we just finished almost 3 hours with Greg talking about what it was like to grow up as the grandson of a Mormon apostle, Joseph B. Wirthlin. Greg is the grandson of Joseph B. Wirthlin, and it was amazing 3 hours. If you haven't watched it, pause this episode, go back, watch the first 3 hours. So many amazing, heartfelt stories. I could just say that Joseph B. Wirthlin was already pretty high on my list of apostles because of what I knew about him. He's kind of jumping to amongst the top of maybe some of my favorite Mormon apostles of all time. I don't know if some of you would think that that's a low bar, but I'm really liking what I'm hearing. So if you want to be inspired, I don't care if you're a Christian, an atheist, a Mormon, ex-Mormon, I think you'll be inspired by what we just learned about Joseph B. Wirthlin as a Mormon apostle. So go check it out. What we're going to be talking about now is Greg's life, starting kind of with his Mormon mission and how a Mormon, how the grandchild of a Mormon apostle can start to have a faith crisis and even potentially question and or lose their faith, and what that's like. That's going to be a major theme for today and for part two. And we're also going to do as much as we can of a Q&A because I've got a bunch of other questions. But a lot of the questions that I wanted to ask, we've kind of covered a lot of them. So that's why I think part one is really important. We weaved and integrated them into the discussion instead of like saving them all to the end. But anyway, welcome back, Greg. Thanks so much for being willing to do this.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me.
Yeah. I was telling you at the break that I think your believing Mormon family, if they aren't, they should be very proud and honored of this interview, because even though it might be viewed as an act of disloyalty to even do an interview on Mormon stories, let alone talk about your faith crisis, like to have someone who may not be an Orthodox Mormon now as yourself speak so honorably about your grandpa, who's a Mormon apostle, I don't think there can be a bigger positive endorsement of your grandpa as a Mormon apostle than have you speaking so highly of him, right?
Well, and I have...
And your grandma, grandma. Yeah.
I have no desire to tear anyone or anything down.
Yeah.
I just want to share the experiences that I had. So
yeah, I'm gonna start by telling you a quick story. Is that okay?
Yeah, great.
So I was friends with Mark McConkie, which is a grandson of Bruce R. McConkie, when I was a grad student at Utah State University, and I think Mark's dad was Mark McConkie. And I think they're from Colorado. But I remember once Mark saying to me, and Mark was a great guy, humble guy, nice guy, smart guy, kind guy. But I remember him telling me, kind of like almost with his chest puffing up, he said, none of the McConkie children or grandchildren have ever lost their faith and have ever left the church. You know what I mean?
Oh, man.
And by this point, I'd lost my faith for sure.
Yeah.
But I was also still active in the church. But I thought, number one, there's no way that's true. Number two, what a weird, boastful thing to say. But number three, like, what a weird, toxic family culture that must have been in, because what that means is that there were people who had lost their faith, but they were terrified to tell anybody.
Yeah.
And then just the fact that was a point of pride and of boasting and just all that pressure, it just made me feel like, what a toxic family. You know what I mean? And I don't know why I'm starting with that story, but we're about to get to how the grandson of a Mormon apostle could lose his faith. And so I just thought that would be an interesting place to start. And Mark's a great guy. I'm not disparaging him.
No, I definitely know where that attitude comes from.
Anything you want to say about that?
I guess I'll just say there is that pride in some people value value the family name more than anything.
Mhm.
And there is that pride that we're all righteous.
Mhm.
And that was always off-putting to me, and to many people. Many of my cousins found that kind of thinking very off-putting and downright disgusting.
Yeah. And it
So-
sounds like that's not where your grandpa's treasure or
no.
his heart was, right?
No, not
Yeah.
at all. He valued everyone in the family, whether they were active or not. And we had plenty of people that were not active, and he knew it. And he was the most Christ-like to one of my cousins that had left the church. And he and my grandma were one of the only adults that actually treated this cousin well. And so if it wasn't for them, no one would have been there for this cousin of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always interesting to see that his own parents were not accepting of him, but the only ones that were my grandma and granddad.
Yeah.
So
I love it. I love this. Okay, so we got sidetracked.
We did.
But I don't see it as sidetracked
You're
because I think these themes were all kind of interwoven. But I think, is it fair to say you talked about last episode about your experience at Westminster College where you took a Bible class that made you question some of the historicity of the biblical figures?
Yep.
And it made you start wondering whether some of the Bible was mythological versus actually historical.
Right.
And we were about to jump to your mission. Is there anything about your patriarchal blessing that was important to your story, or is it not really noteworthy? Because we didn't talk about that. We did talk about your grandpa setting you apart for your mission.
Right.
Is your patriarchal blessing playing to this at all? I was just curious.
I don't know. I never really understood my patriarchal blessing. There's things in it that I was like, whatever that means.
Troubling things? Or?
No, just general statements that I'm like, okay. So I don't know. I had a companion read it and ask him what he thought, because I was like, I don't know what this means.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, well, it's interesting, but I don't know what it means either.
Okay.
So
just weird things.
Yeah, and that's how much stock I put into it. I let another companion read my patriarchal blessing when I was told that that's a no-no.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Didn't mean a lot to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't live by everything it said.
Okay. So we talked last episode about you being called to the Preston, England mission.
The Manchester,
England mission, and you going straight to the MTC is that Preston? Is that where it was?
Yep.
Okay. And talk about, you talked last episode about wanting no one on your mission to know that you were the grandson of an apostle. Do you want to talk about why that, it's obvious, but.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, when people know that, they automatically, that expectations of who you are all of a sudden different.
Mm-hmm.
And for people your age, they wonder why you're with them.
Mm-hmm.
They wonder, well, is this someone that's just like going to be reporting to the mission president on us?
Mm.
And so, like, if I didn't have to deal with that, I thought that things would be so much better not having anyone ever know about that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then, a year before I went on my mission, one of my cousins returned from that same mission. But his last name was Wirthlin, so everybody knew.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really hopeful that people that he knew, I was just hopeful that I wouldn't go to the same area that he went, because I knew he would try to contact people.
Yeah.
So I was looking to just have a 2-year break from the tension of that relationship.
The pressure, the expectations,
Exactly.
The objectification of you, not as a human, but as like a position of status.
Right. And being used to get to my granddad.
Yeah.
Like there was many times growing up where people would try to contact my granddad because they knew us. And
what types of things would they want from your
granddad?
Oh,
they would just want special favors, or to get put in front of, like, just to get to know the leaders. And like when
just access to power.
I don't know what their intentions are, but it was just really, it's just really weird, kind of creepy, to have that kind of interactions with people.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, so that was my hope. I mean, I guess going back one step further. So when I got my mission call, I hand delivered because I was doing yard work and chores for my grandparents. When I had my mission papers ready, I handed it to my granddad, and he just took it into the office. And 5 days later, I had my call. So I guess that's one perk, is you get to hand deliver things to where they go. So I got my call really fast, much faster than I was expecting. I wasn't expecting it for a few weeks, because that's how all of my friends worked out. But he took it into the missionary department himself and said, make sure you send him somewhere good. And I was expecting Tahiti, because that's where I told him I wanted to go.
But he had served in Germany or Switzerland. Like I would have thought maybe you shared his birthday. So I would have expected him to go tell them, hey, make it German speaking, but that didn't happen.
Yeah. And I would have been happy with Germany or Switzerland.
Yeah.
I mean, my little brother went to Switzerland.
Okay.
He's the one that lucked out and got to go to Switzerland.
Yeah.
But I love England, but I was hoping for somewhere in the South Pacific, because I heard that they got to wear shorts. So I was hoping for Tahiti, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay.
But anyways, so I get my mission call, and then the realization that I had to go through the temple. And I was not looking forward to it. And I didn't know why, but I didn't really know much about the temple. And so my parents set up the temple, and I went through the Salt Lake Temple so that my granddad could be there. And it turned out I went through with I think it was Governor Levitt's son, or Governor Levitt was in the same temple ceremony that I went when I went through the first time, as well as there was another apostle. I forgot his name already. I mean, I forgot who it was at this point, but there was 2 apostles' grandkids and someone from Governor Levitt's family in the same temple session, going through for the first time.
Salt Lake Temple?
Salt Lake Temple.
Okay. So these are live endowments, so actors playing the role of, in the endowment.
And there was a lot of excitement. And I just remember, like, at the end when we got to the celestial room, I was just eyes in the headlight. Like
Deer in the headlight?
Yeah, deer in the headlight. And I was just shocked. And I was just kind of speechless. And
Why?
Because I was completely unprepared for what happened. And I just remember just thinking, why is there Satan in the temple? And I had some serious questions, and I was just kind of blown away. And
what were some of the feelings, if you had to describe some of your feelings going through the temple?
I was in shock. I mean, I had no idea that's what it was.
So give some adjectives besides shock. The temple ceremony experience was?
It was terrifying to me.
Okay.
It was unnerving. It was disturbing.
Okay.
I was questioning everything. But at the same time, there was so much focus on the three individuals and me being one of them.
Kind of the blue blood elite.
Yeah. Right.
Respected missionaries.
And I had people coming up to me that I'd never met and asking me what I thought. And my granddad was standing right next to me, and I couldn't be honest, and I couldn't say anything. And
was he in the endowment ceremony with you?
Yes.
Oh, your grandpa was?
Yeah. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. So
so everybody's like, Elder
yeah,
Wirthlin's here in this endowment.
Yeah. So there were two apostles.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. And I can't, for the life of me, I was in so much shock that.
Oh, I see.
I've totally blacked out who the other apostle was.
Okay. So Governor Levitt and two apostles were in a single endowment ceremony.
Yes.
When you're taking out your endowments. So that's a big deal for a temple worker.
Right.
Yeah. Or other members are going to notice.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had had temple workers coming up to us. We had other members coming up to us, all asking us questions, and I was just in shock. And I was I wanted to get out of there as fast as I could.
Wow.
And so and I went to the temple one other time before my mission because I was so shocked. I was just like, what did I just get into? And so then I get set apart as a missionary at church office building.
And by the way, you weren't able to say, hey, Grandpa, there are some things about the temple ceremony that really disturbed me. Can I talk to you about it?
No.
Because
I mean, there were so many people.
No, but even after, like the next day or the next week.
I asked my mom, and she said, well, you really can't talk about it unless you're in the temple. And I wasn't going to be in the temple with him.
Yeah.
Until I got married.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, it
just really wasn't an option to talk to him about
I just want to note, you told the story last episode about the seminary, the person that wanted you to ask your grandpa if he had seen Jesus.
Right.
Which again, I'll just say is it's like their value and credibility amongst the Mormon people is derived from the perception that they have.
Right.
And you never felt comfortable asking him. Here's another example. One of the most generally disturbing experiences in the Mormon experience is the temple ceremony. This guy's your grandpa, and you can't talk to him about it. There's this weird family can't talk about hard things just generally in Mormonism, but even with the granddad as an apostle, there's just things, really big things that you just don't talk about. And that's weird and sad to me.
And part of the reason why I couldn't talk to him was because how many people were coming up to talk to him.
Right.
And that was a theme like every time we went out in public, members would just bombard him. And at my farewell, it was the same thing. Like most farewells, people go up to the missionary afterwards. I had no one come up to me afterwards, which I was fine with because a lot of my close friends had already left on their missions.
Yeah.
And so my high school football coach, who wasn't LDS, he came up to me and talked to me, and that meant a lot to me.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, the line to meet my granddad was from the podium all the way back into the cultural hall, into the gym.
And did that make you say that didn't bother you?
It was just expected. It was just kind of like par for the course. And so, there was a good stretch where we didn't see him for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And he was speaking at Rick's College, Idaho. It's now BYU Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
And so we made the drive up to Rexburg, and we were going to have dinner with him, but it was a snowy day. So we ended up not getting there in time, and then afterwards we were going to have dessert with him. But because of the people that blocked the path and just kind of bombarded him, we ended up making the drive and not even being able to have a conversation with him. And so, like, that was the public side, is you just can't have a conversation. You can't have a private conversation when members are just bombarding them and trying to get in front of them.
Yeah, and that's its own thing. Thanks for sharing those stories. And even days or weeks later, you still don't have that conversation with him, right?
No, because I was a college kid.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to finish finals.
Yeah.
I was trying to get my pilot's license. I was like, as much as the temple bothered me, I also put it in the back of my mind really quickly.
Okay.
And I was a 19-year-old kid that wasn't focused on it.
Yeah.
So
nowadays,
if he was around now, I would have had that conversation with him now. Yeah. I would have, and he would have made time if I would have asked for the time.
Got it.
But when we were together, it's hard to make time when it's not, the time isn't there.
Yeah.
So fast forward, I fly out to my mission. I get to the MTC. We had travel problems, and I ended up getting we missed connections. I was supposed to fly out with a big group of missionaries. We ended up getting separated, and we all came in on different flights, got in late. I get a mission companion. My very first MTC companion was from Europe. He was from Holland, and he was a very by the book, like 100% obedience missionary. And so he and I hit it off great from the start, except for we didn't, because I'm not
being sarcastic.
Yeah, my rebellion side came out pretty quick, and the very first day, I guess I had missed, because our flight got in late. I had missed the opening, the welcome for all the missionaries, and so I didn't meet the MTC president the first day, and I had no idea who he was. And it turns out that he and my granddad were good friends. And he had told the whole MTC that Elder Wirthlin's grandson was coming.
Oh, no.
So my MTC companion knew that I was Elder Wirthlin's grandson. So he thought that I was going to be the most obedient companion he would ever have. So that first night when I got there, I got there at like 4 p.m, and then 6 o'clock we had meetings, and I hadn't slept in over 36 hours. So as soon as the meetings started, they started talking, and I was out cold.
Mm-hmm.
And I slept the whole meeting. And he went into the MTC president's office, which the MTC in Preston, England is really small. There's only, I think there was like 40 missionaries in there while I was there. So it was a very, like, everybody knows everybody. Well, he went in and told on me, and the next morning, the MTC president pulls me aside and is like, "Hey, your companion told on you for sleeping." And I was like, "Of course I slept. I hadn't slept in 36 hours." I was like, I'll fall asleep again today. I'm super tired. So, and he also told on me because when lights went out, I was awake, and I was talking to another missionary from the U.S., and this guy would tell on me for every little thing that I did, every little rule. And so my rebellious side came out pretty quick. And
how'd your mission or the MTC president treat you?
Oh, he was fine with me. The MTC was fairly good, other than the fact that, like, I had people asking me questions all the time, and like I was just trying to learn the gospel at that point. Like, I was trying to learn. I was trying to read the Book of Mormon
For the first time.
For the first time, yeah. I was trying to learn the discussions, because at that point we were still memorizing all 6 discussions, and I'm a terrible memorize person, and it was a nightmare, because I had everybody looking at me to be the example, and I was not a good student. I was not knowledgeable. And then I had a companion that was trying to get me sent home because I wasn't matching up with his expectations either. And
what types of questions were the most common questions besides, has your grandpa seen Jesus? Like, any other really big ones that were super common?
Has he seen the lost plates, or
like the Sword of Laban? And
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Like,
the Urim
like
and Thummim.
where are those things kept? I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't even know. So a lot of questions like that. Like, what's in the underground bunkers in the mountains? And I was like, wait, what are those?
Yeah.
I haven't heard about these.
Interesting.
So I got a lot of questions like that from some of the MTC instructors as well. And then I would try to get away from my companion as much as possible, because he was driving me crazy. And so after one of the times he told on me, the showers at the MTC, you have to walk out of your dorm, walk across the hall, and the entryway to the MTC, you can see everybody from like their shoulders up. And he had told on me for something really, really petty. And I got back from meeting with the MTC president, who told me he was apologizing to me for having to bring me in, because it was almost daily, and I was there like 19 days, and I must have met with him about 25, 30 times.
Really?
Yeah.
Kind of being harassed, basically.
Oh, it was a daily occurrence, sometimes twice a day.
Wow.
And finally, like, I had gotten just sick of it, and so he was I had gotten back upstairs into the dorm, and I saw that he had gone into the shower, and the stalls were on the inside, and he put his clothes on the outside. So I took his clothes and took them back to the dorm and made him do the walk of shame from the showers to the dorm. And then I went downstairs, and I got out of there, and I was in the walkway where you could see him come through. And when he walked through, I heard him just yell my name, and I had to explain that one to the MTC president, because I had just met with him, and I told him that I would take care of it. So that was kind of the theme for the MTC, was that I was always in trouble, and I wasn't as knowledgeable as I should be.
Yeah.
So I get out of the MTC, and everybody that I left the MTC with knew that my granddad was an apostle. And I get to my first area, and that companion, he was also Dutch, so he knew my MTC companion, and he had been warned about me through this companion, because the church is so small there in Holland. Well, he and I got along to a degree, but also were butting heads quite a bit. We got in a really bad traffic accident, and the car flipped.
Ooh.
And he had glass all over his face. The member that we were with broke his back or something like that. He injured his back pretty bad, and I didn't have a cut on me. And so that didn't help out the situation, because he was like, see, because you're Elder Wirthlin's grandson, you're protected and we're not.
Oh my gosh.
And
in his mind, you hadn't earned it, right?
Yeah, I don't know what, but there was some tension from that point on, and so we got transferred. We both got transferred out of that area because of that, and we got transferred into a new area, and we were both hoping that we would be split up at that point. And it was a strange situation. He started telling everybody in that area, and so I asked the mission president. I said, I need a new area and I need a new companion. Can you put me with someone that doesn't know anything about me? So he put me. The next transfer, he put me with two other missionaries. I was in a trio, and they knew nothing about me. And we were together for about 3 weeks, and then we had zone conference. And at zone conference, a visiting general authority came. And I had just been the silent missionary. Life was great with these two. They weren't too concerned with the rules. Like, we did work, but we also had fun. And like the day before zone conference, one of them needed to go pick up something from the store, and so we went shopping, and not on P-Day. And I was like, cool. I was like, this is good. The rules are meant to be broken. Like that's kind of my mentality. Yeah. Well, at zone conference, the visiting general authority, Elder Zwick, he was reactivated by my granddad and my granddad's dad. They were his home teachers. And I had no knowledge of him at all. Like, I didn't know his name. I'd never heard of him, never met him.
This is Zwick of Zwick Construction, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And he called me out, at that zone conference and had me come up and stand in front.
No.
And like from that day on, everybody knew my granddad and just assumed that I knew every general authority because he put his arm around me and he's like, I want you guys all to meet my good friend, Elder Gerritsen. And I didn't know him from Adam. and from that day on, I don't think any of the missionaries fully trusted me because they, like, that trio thought that I had been dishonest with them.
Oh, like you were spying on them.
Yeah. And like they asked if I was going to report them for and so I had to try to tell them, look, it's not what you think it is. But like the relationship was changed from that day forward. And like I had a reputation of being put with trouble missionaries. And I tried to allow people to be who they were. And at the same point, like I was trying so hard to be a good missionary and to do my best. I really believed that I was a firm believer that the church was true because of all the experiences I had with my granddad, that I was trying to teach the gospel, but at the same time, like that balance of living up to the expectations, but also trying to be myself, it was next to impossible with that preconceived expectations that people had of me. And like my mission president expected me to be assistant to the president. And he told me a couple times that I was going to be one.
Wow.
And I did not want that.
Really?
No, that's the last thing. Well, no, that's not the last. I never wanted that.
It's not even on the list.
Because my cousin that had served in that mission was an assistant, and his last name was Wirthlin, and it matched his personality. And I did not want to be the assistant that was the grandson of an apostle. And I had been district leader, zone leader, but I didn't enjoy those callings. It was not something that I wanted, or I definitely did not ask for him. But I definitely felt the pressure from him to be that, and he asked me to share stories in zone conference and mission conferences. We had anytime we had a couple apostles, and we had President Monson visit our mission, and they always tried to put me front and center at those events. And I would always try to sit further back than they asked, and it was just every time we'd have a high profile person come, it was always, I want you to meet Elder Gerritsen. His granddad is Elder Wirthlin.
What's that about?
And I don't know. I think it's like it really bothered me because it puts people in front of other people. And to me it was extremely awkward. It was extremely painful. And it also put a wedge between my relationship and other missionaries. And so I felt very awkward around people.
What's kind of ironic about all that is that, number one, Jesus was about everyone's equal, no one's better
Right.
than anyone else. And then your grandpa, like we read last episode, his talk about the orchestra, and you need the piccolos, and you need the flutes,
Right.
and everyone has a role. So I think even your grandpa just represented the antithesis of that kind of royal elite treatment of,
Right.
of family of Mormon apostles. And yet our church is like, the reason why you're on this podcast right now is because Mormons are just like in the UK, they're fascinated with the royal family. Like Mormons are fascinated
Right.
with the families of apostles.
Yeah.
And so it's this weird kind of almost unchrist-like, and I would say unworthland-like dynamic that like runs the church in some ways.
Oh, definitely. 100%. And it was such a theme throughout my life.
Yeah.
That you are judged on the relationship.
Yeah.
And if you don't live up to that, you are a failure. And you've let everyone down.
Yeah.
And like it was, I had lots of missionaries ask me when I was going to be assistant to the president. And it was such a common theme that I got sick of it. And I remember as I was getting close to the end of my mission, the mission president actually told me that I was going to be called an assistant the next transfer. But at that same time, we were teaching someone that had some really valid questions about the church. And it was disturbing to me. Like I had never looked at polygamy, and I had never looked at the Joseph Smith story. And he had told us that he used to work for the church, and he worked with a lot of the anti-Mormon propaganda, is what he called it. And he could answer any questions we had. And this was about a week after he told me that I was going to be assistant. And so I called him up and I said, "Hey, President, I've got some serious questions here." And he assured me that all my questions could be answered, and said, I'm kind of busy right now, but I will answer these questions, but don't worry about these. He said, you have the Spirit, you have the tools you need. And he just kind of left it at that. But that transfer came, and I came and went, and there was a different set of assistants to the presidents, which I was so glad that it was not me. I was so relieved that I did not get called.
So maybe you telling your mission president that you were having some questions or doubts made him take you off the list of being AP?
That was
saying?
the impression that
Okay.
I had.
Nice job.
That was because from that point on, our relationship had changed.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
Or maybe it is.
Well, and I don't know. I went to one mission reunion since I got home, and since then, that's the only time I've talked with him since then. But I really don't have much of a relationship with anyone on my mission. There's literally 2 people that I still keep in contact with from my mission. And one of them, it's because he's moved close to where I live, and it's a very casual relationship. And the other is a companion from Finland that has left the church years ago, and he and I had the best relationship with, because he was a fellow rebellious at heart missionary that we worked, but we also pick and we picked and chose the rules that we would follow and the rules we wouldn't. And we got along so great. And we also taught a lot of people because we got along so well. But he didn't care about my relationship. And he never once made it a big deal at all.
That's nice. So you have a couple of people that were friends.
Yeah. So, but other than that, I've lost contact with everyone. And the thing that sticks out on my mission was that my relationship with my granddad was used by leaders, by bishops and stake presidents in the wards and stakes that I served in, and by the mission president to kind of put me out there as the grandson of an apostle. And kind of as you can believe him, you can believe what he says because who he's related to.
Mm-hmm.
And that was done time and time again.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So overall, your impressions of your mission are what?
I would say we had lots of experiences where I was used as a tool and not allowed to be an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And just overall, not valued for who you are as an individual.
Yeah.
And I mean, so many cases where the goal is to protect the church and to build the church more than it is to take care of people.
Mm.
And I had companions that had no business being on a mission for either mental health issues or health issues. And they tried to keep people on missions at such a cost to the individuals that they really valued keeping people on missions more than doing the right thing for the individual.
Yeah.
And I had some companions that had some pretty significant mental health issues. The 3 months that I was there, we maybe went out of the apartment 5 times.
Ooh. Mm.
And this companion has had just a rough adult life because of that. And I mean, I have lost all contact with him, but I feel so badly for him for what he went through. And they tried so hard to just keep him there that they did not want him going home early.
Mm.
And then we had missionaries that were pretty blatantly breaking some big rules, like hot tubbing in the in the baptismal font with sister missionaries.
What the?
Yeah. And none of them were sent home.
Mm.
And yet there was someone that was sent home, but he was sent home for reading anti-Mormon literature and having discussions and truly questioning the church.
Mm-hmm.
And yet people that were breaking the big rules were kept out on the mission because they don't want them to be sent home.
Mm. Mm.
And so my thoughts going home were, it's there's certain things that will get you sent home. Everything else is on the table. And it was pretty clear also to me, because of how my mission president treated me once I asked questions, what those things were. And questioning the church is of the utmost negative things you can get to.
The biggest no-no.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was the big takeaway from my mission, was do not question the church.
So did you leave your mission with big questions? And if so, what were they?
Well, yeah. I mean, my mission, I had quite a bit of trauma on my mission too. I mean, my mom got cancer on my mission, and I had a good friend pass away on my mission. I was riding her. We weren't boyfriend and girlfriend, but I was really close to her, and she got in a car accident and died on my mission. And I mean, my mission president asked me if I wanted to extend my mission, and I said, absolutely not. I need to go home.
Yeah.
I mean, I did not like the attention. I did not like, there were so many things that I did not like. I mean, I kept a journal on my mission. I have not opened those ever. And I don't want to open those, because there are so many things that so many emotions that I just do not want to go back to. And so many relationships that I feel like were just, they were blown up from the very start.
Yeah.
That I couldn't be myself around them, and they couldn't be themselves around me. That I never want to read those journals, because it wasn't who I was, and it wasn't who they were.
Yeah.
And I just had nothing but bad experiences in a large chunk of my mission.
And for me, a huge takeaway from this interview, last part and this part, is that kind of from one angle, it's like, oh, family of apostles or royalty, and they're elite and they're privileged and they get all the good stuff. And what I'm taking away from this interview is that's whether it's your grandpa, not being able to really be the part of his grandkids' lives that he wants to, or you just constantly being badgered and judged and even bullied or, harassed throughout your entire life. It just sounds like no picnic at all.
Yeah. I mean, so I will never forget Runcorn, England. That is where I went through a period of my life that was just absolute hell. My mom was diagnosed with cancer. My friend died. My my secret was taken out in the open and just shared with everybody without me allowing it. And I got a letter from my granddad, and it had been opened by someone in the mission home. And I was so mad. I was at rock bottom just because I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody. I mean, you can't call anybody, can't talk to anybody. I can't write anybody without. I can't trust that any correspondence is private. People, if they saw that a letter from church headquarters was addressed to me, they opened it, and it was my granddad would write a letter from his office and just send it. And almost every letter that I got from him was opened.
Can you explain that?
I wish I could.
Why would they feel that they had the right to open an apostle's private letter to his grandson?
I don't know.
That's the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was another missionary, if it was someone that I don't know who did it, but I like my faith in the mission was just like I had no privacy. I had no respect. And so I left with a very sour taste in my mouth. And it just like I didn't trust people. And so I was so excited to get home.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
So yeah, I mean, it's just I think missions are a microcosm of like the church hierarchy at its worst. And that was my ultimate takeaway is like the problems of the church on steroids are what a mission is like.
Yeah. I'm so sorry.
So that's, I mean, so that's, I mean, the Methodist, I don't know what Methodist clergy are called. That was crack 1. Crack 2 was my whole mission experience, really.
Okay.
And then getting home, my mom survived. She did well. I transferred from Westminster up to Weber State. I just could not afford that place.
They had a pilot program?
No, but I went to flight school at the Ogden Airport.
Okay.
And I got a degree in geography at Weber State. And
were you there when Damon Lilliard?
I did. I was there.
I just wasn't sure, but I had to ask.
Yeah, I had a class with Dame.
What?
Yeah, and he just amazing. Like it was so fun. That those basketball games were just a blast. I mean, he was impressive.
For those who don't follow sports, he's an NBA All-Star who plays for the Portland Trail Blazers. Short guy, comes out of Weber State and is one of the best basketball players in the whole NBA. Kind of a freak, right?
Yeah, just amazing. But at the time, he was very down. I have no idea how he is now, and he would never remember who I was.
Right.
I mean, who would? So I mean, but just an incredible athlete, and it was fun. It was fun to watch him, and so
fun.
I mean, I loved Weber State. It was just the perfect college for me, and I majored in geography, had some incredible classes. I was really fortunate to have the professors I had, and it brought more questions. I mean, I'll never forget my geography of Africa class and my geography of Europe class, where we talked about different languages and where they came from and their origins and the history of those two continents and how far back people have history there. And learning about that challenged everything that I had known about the world.
How does that challenge Orthodox Mormonism?
Oh, I mean,
for those who don't know,
yeah. I mean, when you have languages that have origins beyond 10,000 years, and I mean, these people are dated well back. Let's see. I can't remember the specific dates, but it's tens of thousands of years. And we have a world that's supposedly 6,000, 7,000 years old.
Which is Mormon doctrine.
Which is Mormon doctrine.
Yeah.
And
the first humans were who in Mormon doctrine?
Adam and Eve, right? And
6,000 years ago.
right. And Adam
what color were they?
yeah, white. And
Yeah.
and I mean, everything in geography of Africa and geography of Europe just totally contradicted everything that was taught to me in the church.
And languages in Mormonism would have come from where?
The Tower of Babel.
Which would have been less than 6,000 years ago.
Yeah. and I was fascinated by these lessons.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like my grandma had died, and my granddad
2006-ish, 2007?
Yeah, so I was at Weber State from 2004 to 2008. And I met my wife in 2004, like a month or two after I got home from my mission. I started taking her friend out on a couple dates, and there was just nothing there. And I was talking to my wife about it, and we were just laughing, and we just started hanging out, and a year later we got married. And so I got married in 2005.
Really quick, I have to jump back.
Yeah.
Anything you want to share about what your grandpa wrote to you on your mission about, what those letters were like? We don't have to go there if there's nothing interesting there.
Yeah, I mean, he would tell me about family. He would tell me about some of our ancestors, people that he looked up to. He would tell me, it was a very like grandpa to grandson letter, like what you would expect from like, I'm proud of you, like I pray for you every night, like I can't wait to go to a football game with you again. Like that's the type of conversation or correspondence that we had.
It wasn't like obey the rules religiously.
No,
like,
no, never. And
don't disappoint the family name.
Never. And I would never like that. That's not who he was. And that's like, like the correspondence. He would tell me stories about some of my ancestors that lived in England. He would tell me like what he was doing. Not great detail, but I'm going here on assignment. I've got to do this. Like, I've been thinking about you lately. Like, it was, whoever opened up the mail was greatly disappointed.
It wasn't like Jesus told me the other day, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and I know that they were disappointed because they were, if anything exciting was sent in those, it would have been shared throughout the mission before I got it.
Yeah.
because
That's awful.
because there just was nothing secret about me.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so jumping back to your meeting your wife, 2004, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I met her 2004. I met her about a month and a half after I got home from my mission. But I went on quite a few dates with other people.
Do you want to tell the story of Elder Eyring and General Conference?
There was I think it was a First Presidency Christmas devotional. And I was there with a friend, and either after or before, all of the general authorities' families sit up at the front. There's a number of tickets that are given to each general authority, and there's typically enough that you can bring a friend or two. And so I had a friend with me, and we're just talking, and Elder Eyring came up to me and said to me, he's like, "Oh, I'd like you to meet," and it's been so long, I can't remember if it's got to be his granddaughter. Might have been his daughter. I can't remember. But he's like, "You're Elder Wirthlin's son, right? Or grandson, right?" And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I have someone that I'd like you to take out on a date. And it was his either granddaughter or daughter. And I just brushed it off. I was like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. And it was just an awkward moment, because I was like, I don't want that kind of date.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you talked last episode about Gordon Hinckley and your grandpa both being Bittners. The B in both of their names are, they're related.
Right.
And that your grandpa was in a bishopric with Russell and Nelson.
Right.
I happen to sort of have some friendships where I would know that the Huntsmans and the McConkeys and the Wirthlins and the Ballards, they're all intermarried. Many of the apostles are intermarried with other family members of apostles and general authorities.
Oh, and
there's this kind of, I don't want to say incestuous, just like this dynastic royal intermarrying of elite church leaders.
It happens. And I liked the space. I grew up in North Ogden, and I know it's only an hour away, but it was worlds apart.
You like that space?
I loved that
the
space.
Distance from Salt Lake.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because there was enough space growing up that it wasn't the focus that it was in Salt Lake and on the mission.
Yeah.
And it was a different. It was enough of a different culture that it felt good, and you could date someone without. I mean, it was a factor, but it wasn't as big of a factor as it could have been.
But the intermarrying of elite blue blood Mormon royalty, it's a thing.
Oh, it's a thing. It's a thing. I mean, I've got cousins that have married grandkids of other apostles and prophets.
Not that that's bad. I think it's just human. It's human, but
right. But it does have an element of, is it I don't know. It's just different, and it's just something that I chose not to entertain.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you didn't want anything to do with that.
Right. Well, and at the time I was dating someone else. So.
Yeah, right.
And it didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't pique my interest at all.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, tell us what's important about your story, especially in the context of your developing faith, your doubts and your questions about your faith.
So when I realized I was going to marry my wife, she hadn't been through the temple, and with the temple with me, it was such a negative experience that I wanted her to be more prepared than I was. And so I tried to prepare her the best I could. So I told her how scary it was. And I tried to explain everything that would happen so that she wouldn't be as shocked as I was.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was, and I had been trying to overcome that by going back to the temple. And I mean, I was doing my best to overcome my anxiety over the temple, especially meeting my wife. Her family was pretty devout, and it was I didn't want to let her family down, but that was a big worry for me, is how she would handle the temple, because I knew how I felt about the temple, and that was a secret that I couldn't tell anybody, because I thought I was unique in that, because nobody had ever told me that they had questions about the temple.
Yeah.
And I was really worried that someone else would have questions like I did. So I tried really hard to prepare her with, this might sound really strange, but Satan appears in the temple. And at first she's like, what? No, he doesn't. And so I shared all that with her. We chose a a day to get married, and then we went to my mom and said we chose this day, and she's like, "Well, I'll have to check with my dad to see if that works for his schedule, because he's going to marry you guys."
Because that's a big deal to have an apostle marry
right
you in the temple.
And I think my in-laws really appreciated that too.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
So
from their perspective, their daughter's marrying into the Mormon elite, right?
right. And
Not that I'm not saying that's.
Yeah. And my in-laws are great. Like,
Yeah.
they're most down-to-earth people.
They're not climbers, you're saying.
Right. Exactly.
But it would be an honor. It would be an honor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's, I mean, to have him marry us, like, they thought that was great.
Yeah.
So yeah, our day got, basically, we worked it around his schedule.
So Elder Wirthlin did marry you and your wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the Salt Lake Temple.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that was kind of the agreed upon. And I guess one perk, so the top floor of the Joseph Smith building, they have that restaurant, and then they have conference rooms, and the general authorities can get those at a discount, right?
Okay.
So that's where we had a wedding dinner.
Oh, okay.
So that was one perk. I want to be totally honest. There are some perks, and that's and I don't.
You said discount, which means it wasn't free.
Oh no, it's not free.
Okay.
Still got to pay.
Yeah, so the church does a pretty decent job of not giving too many perks or benefits to the family members. That
At least not the extended. Maybe the immediate
Okay.
had more perks,
Okay.
but I don't know. Like, I mean,
you didn't feel.
I didn't feel like we were getting things for free.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't charge anyone to go into the conference center, so I didn't feel like we were really getting that many freebies.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
So
that's good.
But I don't know. People, other family members might have got more free stuff. I don't know.
Okay.
So
how did you're married in the temple to your grandpa?
Yeah, we got married in the temple. Tried to, I mean, I was never going to be that orthodox as my parents were with family home evening and kneeling down for prayers at dinner. Like, that just wasn't who my wife and I were. We were young college students just trying to get started. I was also trying to start my career as a pilot. And 2008, I graduated from college, and we moved up to Juneau, Alaska. And I became a professional pilot up there, flying tourists, cargo, everything and anything. And I started to meet people and started working on Sundays. And then that winter, my granddad passed away, and as I said the previous episode, that was a big crack in my testimony when my granddad passed away. And not because he passed away, but more so because of how the family was second place to the Quorum of the 12. And I had always been taught that family is everything, and family is central to the plan. But what I saw was that the Quorum of the 12 and the First Presidency were the most important thing. And that was kind of another crack. And by that point, we had a child. We had started moving back and forth places. So life was really busy.
Can I ask you a few questions?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to back up to before your granddad passed away. And I'm going to share something that is maybe, I don't know, we've talked about this a tiny bit, but it may even be shocking to you to have me talk about it on the air. But it's something I learned about totally independent of you. So early in the Time of Mormon Stories podcast, someone reached out to me, and I'm not going to really relay anything about this person. They let me know that your grandpa had a daughter who was married to a gay man, and that not only did this granddaughter have a really hard time as the daughter of an apostle being married to a gay man, and I'm not going to say who that is, right? But that your grandpa didn't ever know, that she was never actually able, according to the person that knew about all this, it'd be your aunt, I'm guessing, was never able to actually tell her dad that she was married to a gay man, and he didn't even know. Like, there was something about being the daughter of an apostle where even if you knew that, and even if you loved your dad and had a good relationship to him, you were never even able to talk about that. And you can just say, I don't want to talk about that, or you can talk about it.
Yeah.
But for me, that was one of the very early moments in my Mormon Stories history that struck me about how tragic and sad sometimes these dynamics, these leadership dynamics could be. Because I was trying to imagine how a daughter would feel being married to a gay man in a church that kind of is not pro-gay, but never being able to talk to your dad about it.
Yeah.
And then being a dad who loves your daughter, and then having her, knowing if he could find out later, that his daughter wouldn't even be able to confide in him something so sad and important. Like, what type of world would be where you couldn't tell your dad something so important? And yet that's the impression I got about your granddad's life and family in some way.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know where they're coming from with that. I'll say this: I think my granddad would be very accepting, and I think if it was kept from him, because my perception was that he knew. Because
did he have a gay son-in-law?
Yes.
Okay.
My perception, looking back at things, I think he knew.
Did you know?
At the time, I did not know.
Okay.
But I really, I think if it was kept from him, it was because of other things going on in the family, and they didn't want to overload him with information.
Okay.
But not because he couldn't handle it.
Sure.
Because I think they wanted to protect him from, or they didn't want themselves to be embarrassed.
Yeah. I'm trying to imply that he couldn't have, that he wouldn't have been anything other than loving.
Right.
Just that for some whatever reason it wasn't talked about, maybe.
Right. And
just like you couldn't talk to him about the temple.
Right.
Just like, there are other things.
And I think, there's more a fear of bringing up subjects because you just feel ashamed yourself.
Yeah.
More so than you don't want him to know about it. And it's unfortunate because I think it would be really healthy if, I think he would want to be able to be talked to. And just the sad reality of it is that we put such a high pedestal on these figures that we don't feel like we can have normal human experiences with them.
Yeah.
And so that's the danger when we set people up to be what they can't be.
Yeah.
Is they're still human people, and we put them up to be these ungodly characters that they're never going to fit that bill.
Yeah. That just seemed particularly tragic to me. And I'm not trying to out anyone. Because the reason partly why I'm asking about this is Prop 8 comes, Prop 8 is voted on the year your grandpa dies.
Yeah.
but it would have meant that in the years leading up to Prop 8, your grandpa would have been in those meetings with First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 members talking about the gay agenda and the strategy about how to deal with same-sex marriage and gay people.
Yeah.
And I don't know if when you talked about last episode, the cliques and the tension between your grandpa, do you have a sense for who was in Elder Wirthlin's clique? Or do you even want to say?
Well, yeah, I mean, I know, so I know he was good friends with Elder Hells. I know he was, I know he got along really well with, oh man, sorry, the names are, Elder Haight was really close with him. When Elder Haight died, Elder Uchtdorf took his spot in my granddad's heart. My granddad and Elder Uchtdorf go back to his days in Germany in the 70s. And so there's a big connection there.
Mm.
And I know they're kind of kindred spirits with how they see the world. So how they think people should be treated.
All right. So if we're gonna create this fictitious kind of going after the one love Christ-based apostle cohort, we've got Wirthlin, Haight, Uchtdorf,
Elder Hells,
and Hales as kind of homies in one clique, and then we can use our imagination.
I mean, and Elder Uchtdorf was after Elder Haight, but so it was like-minded people. I mean, my granddad and President Monson always got along. But, I mean, to be fair to my granddad, basically 2005, 6, 7, 8, I don't know how many meetings he went to.
So what's it like being an aging apostle?
I mean, you're given very menial tasks, and you're not much is expected of you. And I mean, he would have afternoon naps. He would have, like, he would go to the office, but I really can't say that he was that involved. So
you talked about what happened when your grandma died. Yeah.
So in 2006, when my grandma died, every night there was someone there with him, spending the night with him, whether it be my uncle or one of my mom's sisters or my mom. Someone was there taking care of him because he did have dementia and he needed assistance. And I mean, to be fair to my granddad, he probably needed to be in an assisted living home, but my family was able to step up and take care of him without him needing to go to a place like that.
But are you saying the church had an interest and showed an interest in kind of managing and controlling his interactions with the outside world?
I would say 100%.
Because their fear would be what?
Well, I mean, they don't want people to see the human side of an apostle
who's aging
and has moments where he's not all there. I mean, even when we got married, and my grandma was his constant companion and was helping him. And when he brought in my wife and I to his office to interview us, and just to get to know us, and we told him that we were going to get married on July 1st, and he kept on calling July 1st June 31st. And my grandma kept having to correct him and help him with that. And I mean, he had signs as at least from 2005 on, that he had dementia. And so I know that in meetings, they started to kind of have him take a back seat. And that, like, his efforts were the general conference talks. Like, that's where he put his efforts into.
Twice a year.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a few public appearances.
Yeah,
So
for me and my cracks in my testimony, so Ezra Taft Benson is a cousin of mine. And he became an apostle, but as I was starting to have my intellectual awakening within Mormonism, I learned about his son or grandson who became an apostate, talking openly about how his granddad, Ezra Taft Benson, had dementia as a prophet, and how the church would, like, literally put him in photo ops, put a construction, like the groundbreaking of a temple, like
right.
put a construction hat on him, put a temple in his, hand, take a photo as if he's vibrant and out and active, being a vibrant prophet of God, when really back home he's like drooling and doesn't even know his name or the name of people around him. So a concerted effort to create a fake impression that he was healthy and vibrant and leading the church when he was the equivalent of someone with dementia. And it was well known privately that Thomas S. Monson had dementia several years before he died, but the church did all it could to hide that and create a different impression. So fakeness and deception.
Well, and as a family member of that, we saw that.
Yeah. And
we also saw the health problems of other general authorities. And to me, it was sad that in their last years, the church tries so hard to hide those health problems that even immediate family members are try to keep them away as much as possible. And
so, like, grandchildren or children sometimes are distanced from their own grandpa. In your experience?
In my experience, yeah. So, I mean, you don't get those final moments back, and it's when they're trying to protect an image, it's kind of the only way to protect that image is to keep as few people around them as possible.
That's sad.
And that's my impression, and that's you may have people refute that, but that's definitely what the appearance is.
So Gerardo has been kind of tuning in, and he was curious to know maybe how your grandpa might have felt about Prop 8, whether he would have maybe disagreed about it, whether he would have been more pro-LGBT, given his Piccolo talk.
Right.
Maybe he would have been more pro-LGBT than some, Oaks or Bednar or Packer or some of those people.
And honestly, it's all speculation on my part, because in my opinion, I don't think he was even involved in any of those discussions.
Would he have gone to the weekly meetings where he would have voted on things in those final years?
I don't know if they would have even involved him in that or not, because he went to the office, but I mean, in meeting with his secretary, one of the times that I did make it to his office before he passed away, I saw his schedule and there was nothing on the schedule, which was not normal for an apostle.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, back 2005, he had a pretty busy schedule.
Yeah.
In 2008, I remember I came home from Alaska before he passed away, and I had to pick up something from his office, and he was asleep in his office, and I just asked his secretary, "Is he busy?" And she just kind of snickered, and it was yeah, he's not busy. So, yeah, I don't think he had any involvement. All I can go off of is kind of how he treated people in the family and his prior positions on things. And I really think he would have said, it's none of our business, and let's just show people love. But that's more of what I hope. And unfortunately, he's not here to say what really happened. And I don't think we'd ever get a straight answer on who was involved in that.
Did he keep journals, and does your family have access to the journals?
If he did keep journals, we do not have access to those.
Yeah. I've been told that Mormon apostles are told they're not allowed to keep journals so that they can't be used by historians to actually let posterity know what really happened within the church, and that if they do keep journals, that it's the church's property, not the family's.
See, and it's all speculative, because that's something that I would not be privy to know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, let's see. Oh man, I had a question that I was going to ask about that. So, okay. So it'll come to me in just 1 second. So as far as him this is what I was going to say. This means that there must be a protocol at church headquarters where those around the apostle make a determination the point at which an apostle is no longer really viable in his right mind and in his ability to operate. And that at that point, a switch is metaphorically flipped where they're like, okay, he's kind of out to pasture. There's got to be a put an apostle out to pasture protocol at church headquarters, where at some point it's shifted from no longer give them assignments, maybe no longer even invite them to meetings, and let's get family on them or watchers on them 24/7, because they've shifted from something of a resource that can do work and value can be extracted to something else, which is like putting them out to pasture, retiring them, and then protecting them from any possible embarrassment. So that must exist, given what you've just said.
I mean, there's got to be a committee or maybe the quorum of the 12, the first presidency, make a decision. I don't know what that process is, but there's got to be some way. There's some decision that's made that we're lightening their load. We're taking their load away, because it definitely happens. And I think it's just part of having such an old geriatric quorum of the 12 and first presidency is when the only way to be replaced is dying. Like there's you're going to have a very old leadership body.
Yeah, gerontocracy, as they call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so at some point you're going to have 2, 3, 4 people that really don't have much faculty left.
And oddly, they are the most senior.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I mean, I think you've already made this point, but I'll just make it explicit. So my guess is you would prefer that it would be more humane, both to the apostle and to the children and grandchildren of the apostle, to let them retire or go emeritus in their 70s or 80s, so that not only they can have a humane final set of years, but so that maybe their children and grandchildren can enjoy them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see what harm there would be by having a process like that. I think the church asks so much sacrifice from people, and sacrificing family relationships. There's a reason why there's so many family members of general authorities that fall away. is because those relationships are completely sacrificed at the expense of having someone give so much of their time. And so the family members have no relationship with that person because that person is traveling the world and at the church office building 5-6 days a week. Well, 5 days a week, and then going to state conferences and regional conferences on Saturdays and Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my granddad would work. Sometimes he'd work 28 days in a month.
Mm.
And you don't have time for you don't have time for family relationships at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you really know how your kids or your grandkids are doing when you're in meetings all day and you have no idea what's going on?
Yeah. It's kind of inhumane.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's sad. That's sad. And I mean, I guess you can say it's respectable that they were so committed and dedicated that they, in effect, gave their lives to the church. I mean, but also, did you just say that a lot of children and grandchildren of Mormon apostles, in your experience, have fallen away?
Yeah, I did.
Can you talk about that? I'm not asking you to name names per se, but like, are you saying you've seen that as being common? Because that's very different than how I started this episode with Mark McConkie bragging that none of the McConkie grandchildren have ever fallen away. That's different than what you're saying. You're saying
I'm saying
more than average have fallen away.
I'm saying it's kept on the down low, but when you're on the outside, more people are willing to talk to you that have left, and there's more that leave than you'll know about, but it's definitely a larger percentage than you're led on to believe.
So they've reached out to you? I mean,
yeah,
we're jumping ahead a little bit.
Yeah, I've had family members, but also when I tell family members, then some of those family members will say, "Oh yeah, well, I've heard about this person and this person as well, and this person," and you're like, "Oh, okay, there's a lot more than you think."
And you think some of that is just all these things you're explaining throughout parts 1 and 2 about the unpleasant negative parts of being family of an apostle. Do you think those are, so I guess you're saying those are some of the main drivers that lead people out?
I would say one of the major drivers is the fact that they're asked to sacrifice so much that they end up having to sacrifice a lot of their relationships as well.
Yeah.
So much so that when that relationship is what you're judged by, and you see that like the value of you as an individual is not as great as the value of the church, like it's a little dehumanizing. And so you start to think, well, what's the most important thing for the church? Is it the image or is it the people? Because it sure doesn't feel like it's the people to a lot of us.
Who are on the inside.
Yeah. Because I can tell you at the funeral, we did not feel like we were the most important people, or like the family time was not the important part.
The important part was
how the church is viewed. So.
And the other, like you said, the other apostles.
Yeah. Like we gotta take care of them first, then comes the family.
Yeah.
So.
That leaves a mark on you.
Yeah. I mean, it's you can't preach families and then do something different and still have the family message come across.
Yeah.
So.
Let's talk about your faith crisis, because I know you got to get out of here at some point.
Yeah.
How much time do you have before you have to leave?
I could probably wrap it up in about 30 minutes.
No, I don't want you to go.
Okay.
I want to keep you for as long as I can.
Okay.
So you have to leave at what time?
Oh, we're good.
Okay.
So I'll let you know.
Okay. Well,
So-
I've got a lot of questions, so I got to
Okay.
prioritize which ones to ask.
Okay.
So you're married.
So
You become a pilot. Your grandma pass away.
yep.
Let's talk about how a grandson of an apostle loses his faith.
Yeah. So I bounced around through quite a few jobs. Fast forward to 2011, I'm flying for SkyWest Airlines as a pilot, and I start meeting quite a few pilots that have church history questions and doctrinal questions, and one of them is going through a divorce, and he's going through a divorce because he's got these questions, and his mother-in-law is irate that he's getting ready to leave the church, and she wants his wife to leave him, and he just wants answers, and nobody in the church is willing to talk to him. And I'm on a 4-day trip where it's he and I flying the plane together. The flight deck door closes, and it's just he and I flying 4 to 5 hours a day together. And he spills his soul to me. He lets me know everything. And I'm like, one of the things that my granddad, one of the last pieces of advice he gave me, I was asking him what I should do, what I should tell an employer, because I was about to quit. He just said, just tell the truth. He said, the truth is what we should all be after. He said, value the truth in everything you do. And
that's the Mormonism I grew up in.
And so that stuck with me. And so I said, well, if it's true, we'll find the truth. And I told him, I was like, I'll look at these things. I'll go ahead and tell me all your concerns. I'll write them down and I'll start researching. And so 2011, I started, and I looked at Journal of Discourses, Fair Mormon.
What were the top 5 or 7
farms
doubts or questions you remember?
The number one question he had was, well, he said just Joseph Smith in general. Did Joseph Smith really have a first vision? Did Joseph Smith practice polygamy? And so that's where I started, was with Joseph Smith. And I remember reading Lucy Mack Smith's book, which I had to really search for on the internet. And that took me down the rabbit hole of Brigham Young banning that book, which led me to so many questions about Brigham Young, which then I got into everything. And that I was looking at only church sources and things that I could find and I hadn't found Mormon stories at that point. And I think it was 6 or 7 months into it before I found Mormon stories. And by that point, I had created quite a long list of problems that I had come up with.
What were some of those?
Why did Joseph Smith send out married men on missions so he could marry their wives? Why? Let's see. I can't remember the order, but just why is there priesthood celebration every May when we don't even know the date? And the date,
of the Melchizedek priesthood.
Of the Melchizedek priesthood, yeah.
Yeah.
The Melchizedek priesthood really bothered me, and that was back in 2011. And I remember asking in Elders Quorum, what date it was brought back, and I just got nothing.
And we just did an episode on this on Mormon Stories podcast about the priesthood restoration and how it looks like Joseph Smith made up the Aaronic and the Melchizedek priesthood stuff and the John the Baptist and Peter, James, and John stuff years after, like up to 5 or 6 years after it allegedly happened, and wrote that back into the history later, which is why there's no dates for it, when he was being challenged for power by other members of the church. And so if you watch one LDS Discussions Mormon Stories episode, watch the recent one on the priesthood restoration, because it's disturbing.
Yeah.
And it was disturbing for you.
Oh, it was very disturbing to me. And I would have killed to have the resources that you've put out now back then, because my faith transition would have lasted a lot shorter. So, but at the time I was going through all kinds of documents, and I did all of this without my wife knowing. I was a very silent study guy. I would be in hotels for 4 days while I was out flying, and that's where I did most of my research. And I would come back, and I would talk to. There was a group of pilots that it was pretty much known that these are Mormons, but they're almost former Mormons.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them, his name is Charlie, he told me that the Book of Mormon should just be thrown out. And so then I started looking at the Book of Mormon.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had so many questions. And
pick 5.
Just like the lost 116 pages. Why couldn't that have been brought back by an angel?
Mm-hmm.
Why couldn't anybody actually see the golden plates? And why did he need to put his head in a hat and
to translate?
And
you're talking about the spiritual eyes, that the witnesses seeing the Book of Mormon,
right?
Not with their physical eyes, but with their spiritual eyes,
right? And then why are there no golden plates today? Like, why can't we see them?
Mm-hmm.
Why would an angel want those to be taken away?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If no one else can translate them, what's the purpose of hiding them?
Yeah.
And just so many questions about, like, if we had scripture, new revelations back then, why don't we have any revelations now?
In 2022.
Right. Exactly. I mean, like, the time gap between the last revelation and now is so big that it's almost safe to say that there's no revelation now.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
unless you redefine revelation to be a general conference talk, which is what we do.
But it was a cop out, and when most conference talks are just the same old version of of the gospel, it's really hard to accept that as revelation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you can have an inspiring message, but is anything really revelatory? And that was the apex of my faith transition, was coming to all those points, and then all those leading to more and more questions. And by 2014, I was fairly confident that the church wasn't true. And by 2017, I was officially done believing. And
can I just say that over the years, if I had to pick one profession that per capita I've had the most people reach out to me as having lost their faith, it would be pilots. Like my friend Dan, my friend Rex, my friend Calder. There are, just walking through the Salt Lake airport, I can't tell you how many times a pilot just randomly stops me and says, John, thanks so much for Mormon Stories.
Yeah.
There is something, and I've asked a few of them, why are so many pilots ex-Mormons? And it's like, well, we've got hours and hours in a quiet cockpit. It's either lots of time to listen to podcasts, because what else can you do? You can't watch things. So you listen to podcasts or you talk to other pilots.
Yeah.
And so like, ex-Mormon pilots, like, I'm calling you out. There's a lot of you, and I've met a lot of you, and a shout out to you. Because it's a thing.
I know quite a few.
Yeah.
And it's a growing number as well.
Yeah.
So, but you have so much time to study things. When you get into a hotel, you don't have the distractions of taking kids places. You only have so much time when you're at home, and you've got other responsibilities. But when you're in a hotel and you've got free time, that's when I did my research, and that's when I got to know what Mormons actually believe and what I believe. And I learned that it's okay to not know. And that was the most freeing thing to come to a determination was, I don't know. And that's okay. You don't have to know everything. And it was really exciting, but at the same time, my family has been so Orthodox for so long, and my wife and her family have been so Orthodox. I would say they're accepting, but also having the interaction with my fellow pilot that went through a divorce because he questioned, I was very cautious to bring it up with my wife. And so I didn't let her on to me questioning until at least 2014, 15. And by this point, she had realized that I had stopped doing family home evenings. I had stopped taking the lead on most things. And so she knew something was up. Mm-hmm. But she also allowed me to be who I was and not. She didn't question me, and she trusted that I was fine. And so she kind of just let me be whatever I needed to be. And finally, like, this is going to sound crazy, but 10 years after I started questioning, she said, all right, I'm ready to hear what you have to say.
So is this last year?
Last
is this
year.
2021?
2021. I was set to go up to Alaska with one of my sons the next morning. And we spent almost the whole night going through all of the church issues. And my son that was going to Alaska with me heard everything. And so as soon as he and I got up to Alaska, he said to me, he said, I heard what you and Mom were talking about, and I've got some questions I want to ask you about the church. And he said, I've always thought that agency is a weird thing when the church doesn't give you agency on a lot of things. And to me, it was like wow, I'm so glad my son is thinking and seeing for himself, because this is going to make it so much easier. And like since that time, like my wife is still going through her faith journey. I don't want to say it's a crisis because it's such a great thing to come out from. And she isn't quite ready to tell her family, but she is getting so close to getting to that stage. And it's been so validating and exciting to see that she's come through this on her own choosing, as well as with me just being patient with her.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that I did not force it upon her and put down like an ultimatum to her, because it's made our relationship better knowing that I went through it when it was right for me and she's gone through it when it's right for her. And through that in-between stage, she really respected me and I respected her enough that it never became an issue in our marriage.
And that's a miracle, and it's very rare.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know that.
I do know that.
I just want to call out something very significant. So there's, it's generally known that the church is hemorrhaging its members in 2022, that of the 16 million members that the church claims, maybe 4 or 5 million are active and still identify as Mormon. Maybe it's more, but it's low. It's like a third of the members by this point are active and still identify. So there's a massive apostasy going on.
Right.
So we could look around us and we know all sorts of people who have left the church. What sometimes we don't talk about is how many people lost their faith but just stay in the church and don't tell anyone.
Right.
That's probably bigger than the number of people who have left. And I just want to highlight the fact that you went 10 years basically either having serious doubts about the church or completely not believing in the church. And you were not only not wanting or able to talk to your own wife about the details of that, but like everybody around you didn't know either, or most people around you had no idea.
Right.
And I just want people to think about the fact, like we're going back to Mark McConkie and his and he's a good guy, but his brag that none of the McConkie grandchildren ever lost their faith. Like what percentage of people who are perceived as active Mormons are really closet non-believers, but are absolutely terrified or petrified to ever tell anyone.
Yeah.
And so they're just suffering in silence.
And a lot of it is because of the negative culture of the church of, if you leave, your relationships are permanently damaged. Your ability to make money might be damaged. Your friendships might be lost. And just every aspect of your life could be changed forever from it. And it took me, I told my brother in 2017 that I was ready to tell my family. But I decided to wait because of things that my family said. And I waited till 2021 to tell my parents. And when I told my parents, it changed our relationship. And
your parents have had callings, pretty significant callings. Is it okay to say, or do you not want to talk about that?
Yeah. It was stake presidency, bishopric.
Mission?
Yeah, they're on a mission right now, actually, in Italy.
Okay.
And so.
Has he been a mission president, your dad?
No.
Okay,
no,
okay.
No. So.
But super devout still.
Oh, yeah. Very devout.
And so when you decided, you were afraid to tell them.
Well, I was hoping I could just let them pass away before.
Mm-hmm. You would have almost preferred them die.
I would prefer that because I knew the reaction. I knew they would feel that I had died spiritually. And that's almost word for word what one of my parents told my siblings.
So about you? Or
about me.
Do you want to just restate that? Like, what happened?
So basically, I told my parents that I no longer believed. And Last year.
Okay.
And after I told them, one of my parents told a sibling of mine that it's easier to have someone die physically than die spiritually. And, you know, I mean, it's what's hurtful to me about that is I don't think my kids would think that it's easier for me to die, easier for them to have me dead physically than spiritually. And so I took issue with that, and I let my siblings know, like, look, if that's how they feel, then I don't, until they change their viewpoint, I don't know if I can have a good relationship with them for a while. And I mean, we just haven't, since I've told them, I haven't been able to have a deep conversation with them. They've never tried to see where I'm coming from. It's kind of a one-sided thing where it's okay for them to talk about the church and try to be bringing me back into it, but I can't bring up anything. And so, like, even their mission farewell was a chance for them to preach to me. And so things like that, when you decide to tell people, you do need to be prepared that relationships can be altered permanently, or at least for a long time. And so with that reaction, it took me a little longer to let all of my siblings know. And just a couple months ago, I let all of my siblings know, because I was like, well, I've got to have that burden off my chest. I just need to be honest with everybody. And so,
how'd that go?
You know, it went okay. I've heard from other people that they've talked to that they've got issues with it, but you know, I mean, I've got 3 siblings that I've got a lot of trust and really good relationships with, that I know we're in a great place, and the other 3, I think we'll get to that place. So
many things I want to either highlight or ask.
Yeah.
So as far as your mom's treatment of you, not to pick on your mom, but like I get why your dad would make you feel like he would rather you be dead than have lost your faith, in a sense.
Yeah.
But your mom was Joseph B. Wirthlin's daughter.
Right.
Joseph B. Wirthlin gave that talk about the piccolo and the orchestra and how we need everyone. Your grandpa, your mom's dad, was the one that was about unconditional love and going after the one. So, and I know you love your mom, and I know your mom's a good woman, but I'm trying to like connect the dots of how she's not emulating her own dad in how she treats you.
And part of her problem right now, she's on a mission. And all of the communication I have with her is with my dad on the same line, because they're always together. And so it's a really hard thing to have a private conversation with her.
So you can't have a one-on-one talk with your mom right now?
That's kind of how it feels right now. And it's a very interesting family dynamic. I look forward to the time that I can take my mom to dinner and have a conversation with her, because there's a lot of unpacking that I want to do with her, and we just haven't had that moment yet. Mm-hmm. So to be fair to her, like I would love to have a conversation with her in private. Mm-hmm. And she is a wonderful woman.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I don't want, I think the culture of this is really hard on people that are very devout.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I mean, you're drilled. This is where I feel like it's okay to call it a cult, is because you're pretty much brainwashed to believe that when you leave the gospel, you are a son of perdition. You are denying the testimony, and that is where a lot of this negative reaction comes from. And it's not because they don't value me as a person. It's because what the institution teaches them about people that leave, and the threat that people that leave are to others' testimonies. And I think that's the reaction, and that's more on the institutions and the teaching of the institution than on,
of course,
the family members.
Yeah. Two other questions that come to immediate mind. So I'm just remembering now how you felt during your grandfather's funeral, how the church came before family. Fast forwarding to now, where you lose your faith and you kind of feel estranged from your own parents.
Because of the church.
It feels like that's just reinforcing those feelings you had earlier.
Oh, definitely.
That again, the church trumps family, in a church that claims to be all about family. That must be a rub for you.
It's 100% the reality I see, is that we preach family, but in the end, it's only family if we all believe the same way. And the moment you step outside of that belief, you are no longer in the inner circle of the family, and you are a threat to the rest of the family. And that's, I mean, there's still love there. There's still really nice things said, but the actions don't always match the words.
Yeah.
And the teachings of the church stand out to, like, now it's easy to see that. And I've been pretty open with, we have 5 kids, and I've been really open with my 5 kids, and it's pretty safe to say for me that none of my 5 kids will ever serve missions or be Orthodox members.
Unless they fall in love with a cute girl.
Yeah.
Or boy, who's a faithful Mormon and believer. I'm kidding.
But in talking with all of them, they are coming to their own conclusions, and they've had both the Orthodox teachings, and then I've presented them with a lot of Mormon stories programs, and I thank you for that, because what you've given us as a family has allowed me to teach them both sides of the story, and it's given them the true power to choose. Because, I mean, there's so many kids that have been set up in this system, and before they know it, they're on a mission, and they've never been exposed to reality. And they get to a point where they've made decisions that they would never have made if they knew the full story. And I'm so grateful that my kids have the ability to make that choice now, because I didn't have that, and most of us didn't have that. But now, with all the resources we have, there's no reason why people can't be informed now.
Beautifully said. I'm dying to know which Mormon Stories episodes you've played for your children. if you even remember, like, I'm geeking out on Mormon Stories right now, just wanting to know which ones you would choose.
Well, Hans Matson is one of my favorite.
Yeah.
I felt such a connection to that story. That one was I remember plowing our garden on the tractor, listening to that story. And I must have gone over our garden. We have an acre garden that I was plowing with a rototiller with my tractor. And I must have gone over that garden about 10 or 11 times. And my wife was just waving at me like, "You're done." But I was just so encaptured with that episode that that it did so much for me. And
now, do you know if that was the original one, or is that the one when I went back and interviewed them later?
that was the original one.
Okay. Audio only.
Yeah, audio only. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
There's been a lot of the LDS discussions recently I've showed my kids, and that's been really great just to help them understand each topic. I did show them the South Park episode, and they had it's funny because they'll go to church and I'll be flying and I just get a text, "Dumb, dumb, dumb." And I know exactly what they're talking about. Someone is teaching either about Joseph Smith or about some gospel topic, and they're just saying, this is outrageous.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's really fun for me to have that interaction with my kids, knowing that they are able to see things for themselves, and they're getting the cultural side of Mormon that they like, but they're starting to want to separate themselves from the church side. And as that happens, I think it'll be really easy for my wife to open up to her family.
Yeah. And really quickly, it's hard to open up and come out as a non-believer, just generally within Mormonism. I'm just going to assume that it's harder to do that when you're the grandson of an apostle. True? Not true?
It took me 10 years.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I have no idea how it would have been for me with my granddad here.
Yeah. Would you ever come out if your grandpa was still alive?
That's a great question.
What's your guess?
I guess that because I took his truth advice to heart, I would tell him. And because he valued honesty so much that he was able to bring out honesty in others. And I think that's because he was a genuinely good person that believed what he said. That I think he would have been okay with it too.
But just like your aunt didn't want to tell him that she had a gay husband,
Right.
I could also imagine you not wanting to either burden him or you not wanting to disappoint him.
Yeah, I could see that. But I also, like, looking back at our interactions and knowing that I had inactive family members when he was alive, and he still treated them with love, that I don't think I would have been intimidated by him because he did care about everyone.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have changed how he treated us.
That's great.
So,
what a great man.
So I truly believe that he did care more about individuals.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to do a quick lightning round of some questions Tell me how many minutes I have about.
About, I don't know, say 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay, we're going to do a lightning round. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So one thing that I, in a way, it's just, this isn't even a question, it's more of an observation. Nowadays, most Mormon general authorities and apostles seem to be either lawyers or business, kind of wealthy business executives. And then there's some doctors and then kind of some church educators.
Yeah.
Your grandpa seems to stand out because he was a butcher. Like, there aren't a lot of people that now rise to those ranks who just had more common everyday middle class kind of jobs. Is that your experience, that's rare?
I think, so President Faust, I remember he and my granddad talking about finances at one get together, and President Faust was talking about how he needed to get his shoes repaired because he couldn't afford to replace his shoes. And
as an apostle?
Yeah, he was in the first presidency at the time.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know his story, but I just remember looking down at his shoes and seeing that he had pretty old shoes on. And at the time, this was mid 90s, I think around 95, 96. And my granddad just joked. He's like, if I was a good businessman, I would have sold 10 years later. So, I just think business wise, or money wise, not all of them fit that mold.
Yeah.
I don't think,
or they didn't back then.
Yeah. I think the church changes, and I think the church has changed a lot from the 1980s to the 2000s. And I don't think my granddad would be an apostle if he was around now.
He wouldn't have been chosen as an apostle.
Right.
Do you think he was chosen in part because he knew Russell and Nelson and he knew Gordon B. Hinckley? They were family. Do you think there's nepotism that goes on in terms of the selection of Mormon apostles or general authorities?
That's a great question. And it's purely speculative on my part. And I have my guesses. I believe that there is it's definitely easier to take a known commodity than an unknown commodity. And so if you have two people that you're thinking of and someone is related to this person and you also have experience working with that same person and you don't know this other person, it's generally acceptable that you would choose a person that you know, whether it be for any kind of job or calling. So I would say, if I had to guess, that definitely played a role into how he got called.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to say about, do you know anything about disagreements or fights or contention within the Quorum of the 12 that you would have had exposure to?
Well, just the one story that I showed with when I was at my...
Okay.
That's the only personal,
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard things from my mom about interactions with various ones. It was, to me, it was a pretty poorly kept secret that my granddad and President Packer didn't see eye to eye on a lot of topics. Now, other cousins might not have had that perception, But in talking with my mom as I was growing up, that was definitely a perception that I had.
Yeah.
So
someday, I mean, since the journals weren't kept, allowed to be kept, we won't really know, but it would be so fun for a historian to be able to go back into the 1980s and 90s.
Oh yeah.
And study the tensions in the quorum between the quorum members.
Well, and also one thing that I've been thinking about as I've been getting ready for this is that I really feel that there's apostles that are in the know on everything, and then there's apostles that are like kind of the grunt apostles, if you know what I mean. Like they're given a lot of assignments, and they're more of like the hands-on. Like they're going to be in charge of the missionary department. They're going to do this and that, and they're not going to be hands-on on the big stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to be briefed on things and given a very watered-down version of things. But they're kept busy with other things.
I'm guessing Uchtdorf is in that status right now, right?
That's my same guess.
Yeah.
But, and I take that guess from the things that my granddad was in charge of. Like he was in charge of the Polynesian Culture Center in Hawaii. He was over he was given very busy tasks that kept him out of a lot of things. And so it would be very, I mean, there's so many things that run in a church that could keep someone extremely busy, so they would never have the time to look into things.
So they would have assignments.
Oh, I mean,
assignments to keep them out of the way and to keep them busy. I remember also hearing that Richard G. Scott was kind of put in the penalty box because when his wife died, he refused to get married again.
Yeah, and
there were a lot of brethren who were mad at him for that, and so he was kind of punished.
Oh, my granddad saw eye to eye with Elder Scott, and they were pretty good friends. And Elder Scott was really good to our family. He always made it a point to come and talk to us, and I have nothing but fond memories of him because he was so nice to us. Yeah, and I know my granddad. He said plenty of times that he would never remarry, that he could never replace his. And my grandma's name is Elisa, and he said, I could never replace my Elisa. And just, there was no thought of him ever remarrying.
And that's different than Nelson and Oakes, who have both remarried, right?
And
happily, I mean, it seems like they were happy, excited.
Yeah, and you have 15 people, you're going to have 15 different personalities.
Yeah.
And it's just, he was wired differently than some of them.
Yeah. Okay, one of the hugest questions ever asked, and you've probably already partly addressed this, but it's like, do the apostles really believe? First of all, do they know the problematic history? And it sounds like you may not even, because you learned about the stuff after he had passed away.
Right.
So do you have any idea whether your grandpa would have known the problematic history at all? I
wish I knew that answer.
You don't know?
I would give a lot to know the answer. I mean, that's been the $100 million question for me. I mean, I've spent a lot of sleepless nights thinking about that.
I mean, technically, you could ask your mom; she might have more of an idea. But then she's a believer, so you couldn't have that conversation.
Right. I mean, it's a really tough thing. I mean, I have gone back and forth on this question. I mean, yeah, I can't even tell you how much time I've spent on that question.
Do you remember what year he was made an apostle?
1986.
Okay, so that would have been when Sunstone and Dialogue were really getting prominence. He would have been an apostle during the September 6th excommunications.
Yeah.
He would have been a general authority around the time of Mark Hoffman. So, I mean, there's a lot of really big church events that would have called his attention
I've gone
to the
through
problematic
it all.
history.
Yeah. I have, I mean, back when I started questioning, I looked at almost everything. I went through every talk of my granddad's to see if I could decipher things. I still have not come to a conclusion one way or the other. I am really glad that he focused more on Jesus.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do want to say if anybody has had experiences with him that have been negative, I apologize. I really don't think in his heart of hearts he would ever do something to negatively affect someone. But I think he was a genuine believer. I really think he was genuine. Now,
he wasn't perpetrating a fraud consciously, in your opinion.
In my opinion, that's what I hope.
Yeah.
That's what I have to hope, because I have still the utmost respect for him. Mm-hmm. Now, I do recognize that there is a possibility that he knew there were issues and he knew there were problems. I also think he might have recognized them too late into the process, and he was trying to promote change from within. And that's why some of his talks at the end were so focused on changing people and changing their hearts. So that's
and being inclusive and loving everyone, and
right,
everyone having a role, right?
Yeah, and he focused more on the last 3 years of his life. There was very little talk about standard Mormon doctrine, and more so on changing your heart and doing what can be done to be more Christ-like. And so that's kind of what I hold my hopes on, is that he was trying to change from within.
Yeah. It's a bummer he's not around for you to ask him questions now, right?
Right. But it's what it is.
Yeah. Do you ever remember LGBT issues coming up with him knowing a gay person, talking about LGBT issues? Did that even ever come up?
No.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
that you're aware of.
I know it came up in the family, mm-hmm. but it was all about it wasn't a big, I never heard anything about condemning. So, I mean, it was never like a big conversation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I don't know.
You would never have heard him say homophobic things or disparaging things about
never.
LGBT people. Okay.
No,
that's good.
Not a chance.
Okay.
And I mean, same thing for racist remarks. Like, I mean, he grew up in a very different world than it is now, but he was very accepting and very, like, he was very good to people, and I never heard anything disparaging from him.
That's great. Okay, here's a hard question. Number one, if you were to ask him, if you could have gone back and asked him whether he'd seen Jesus, A, what would he have said? And B, do you think he did see Jesus?
I think he would have been honest with that question to me. Because I think he would have said no. I just have personal experiences with how I feel. And I think that's what one of the things that we looked at after he passed away was his scriptures. And he had marked in his scriptures everything that Jesus said. And he had underlined like all of Jesus's words in the Bible. And to me, like that was what he lived by. Because that was the most important thing in his mind is Jesus's own words.
Wow.
So to me, I think
it's almost like I'm a Christian being held captive by the Mormons. Help, help, help.
Yeah. I mean,
that's the Jefferson Bible. The Jefferson Bible, Thomas Jefferson went through and created a Bible of just Jesus's words and like none of the miracles, basically.
Yeah. And, you know, that's the kind of family discussions we had was focus on those. Like that's what life eternal means to him. That was one of the lessons that I remember from him was when he told us that.
Yeah.
So now someone else might have taken something else from his discussion to us, but that's what stuck out to me.
Yeah.
So
beautiful. Any information about the second anointing that you know or can share about him or your parents,
you know,
or aunts and uncles?
I only heard about the second anointing from your Tom Phillips interview.
Okay.
So I had no clue about that. I've only learned about that post Mormon life for me. So I would be surprised if my parents have had that. Because I've had no inclination that they ever were part of anything like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. All right. So I don't want to keep you from your family. So let me just ask you this. Is there anything else that I should have asked you that I didn't, or any other final stories you want to share that you haven't had a chance to share about you, your life, your grandparents, any of it?
Oh.
Or any final words you want to share? Like, I can imagine apostles at church headquarters or leaders of church headquarters or even Orthodox family members of yours, maybe aunts and uncles, saying, man, I'm really disappointed in Greg. How could he betray the family?
Right.
How could he betray the church? You kind of talked about this at the beginning about your intentions.
Yeah.
What would you say to anyone who would just feel disappointed in you for even coming on Mormon Stories and speaking up?
You know, the thing I would say to anyone that has a problem with this is I worked really hard to fit in the system and to respect the system. And I think our family has given quite a bit to the church in sacrificing things for the church. I mean, one final story. This will kind of illustrate the point as to what the church meant. And as a kid growing up, like we would miss out on quite a bit to attend church things. And one Christmas, I think I was 14 years old. I was pretty sick that Christmas morning, and my granddad was speaking at the MTC, and he was speaking at the MTC, and then they were going to have dinner for my family at the MTC. And I was so sick, like I could barely walk that morning. And my dad was really upset that I would fake like I'm sick to get out of going, because he thought I was just being a teenage boy that didn't want to go. And he ended up, long story short, he left me home. I was home all alone, and it was 1997, so there weren't quite cell phones. And my eardrum popped. I had such a bad ear infection that it popped, and like there was blood and pus everywhere. And I had no one to call. No one. My family was at least 2 hours away, and they left at 8 in the morning. And when they got back at 10 p.m. that night, I was just, my fever was so bad, I felt like I was going to die. And my mom just felt crushed that they were at church when she should have been at home with me on Christmas. And like I couldn't hear out of my ear. I had a terrible infection, and she was taking me to the hospital Christmas night because they didn't take care of me during the day. And my message to people that are upset with me coming on here and telling the story is, like, at what point can people be authentic and tell experiences and not have the church try to police everything you say? I mean, we're taught to be honest in our dealing with all of our fellow men, and yet we can't be honest with ourselves, and we can't question, and we can't talk about questions. And when we do talk about questions, then we're threatened and we're punished, and we're told that we need to look at more faithful and reliable sources. And when we can't find those faithful and reliable sources to answer questions, then we're told that we just shouldn't question. And at some point, we have to speak up and say, no, this is wrong. You need to question. You need to have the ability to talk. And it's okay to speak out. It's okay to realize the system is broken and it can't be protected anymore. And no matter what kind of legacy is left, I would love for my granddad to have a great legacy. But what's more important is for people to understand that the church that he was a part of is not the true church. There may not be a true church, but what matters is that let's not prop up something that is false. Let's not keep an institution on a high pedestal when it doesn't deserve that. And that's why I'm here. It's because we need more voices shedding light on the problem. And the problem isn't you and I having this discussion. The problem is them trying to prevent us from that discussion.
So what I take from that, number one, is that you don't believe the church is true, which is obvious from the story we just heard, but also you feel like the Mormon church is doing a lot of harm.
Yeah, I think the evidence is overwhelming. I mean, I look at my kids and I see the pressure that they're put in just to fit in the box when they see the issues and they see, well, I'm not going to do that. But yet the church leaders still try to push them to talk in church, to do things, and they try to take away the agency to do that, and it only drives them closer to me and further away from the church. And then by them pushing them closer to me, it frustrates the leaders more and more, and it makes them say hurtful things to the kids, which...
About you?
No, well, about me, but as well, it makes the leaders say things to the kids about, well, you're not turning out that great.
That's how you were. Those are the messages you were sent when you were a teen.
Right. Fortunately, I'm able to talk with my kids, and they don't take much stock into what these leaders are saying because they understand where they're coming from. And so my kids are able to handle it in a healthy way, and they just let it roll off their backs, and they just kind of laugh it off. But like, there's other kids that are being told these same messages, and they're not given the resources to let it roll off their backs, and it can damage people. And you know more than anyone how many people's lives are damaged by this kind of behavior. And it's got to stop. There's a need for people to stand up. And I remember an episode, I can't remember what episode it was, but you were talking about how there's plenty of general authority family members that talk to you but aren't willing to come on.
Yeah.
And I was listening to that, and I was agreeing with everything that you were saying, and then it hit me. I was like, well, if I'm not really willing to talk, I'm not willing to be part of the solution. And that's ultimately why I decided to come on, is because if I'm not willing to stand up and say, here's my voice too, I'm willing to shed light on it as well, then I'm as complicit in covering up the problems as anyone else. So that's ultimately why I decided to reach out.
I have to admit that when I said that, I thought, I wonder if there's someone out there listening who might hear this. I mean, that's how I think. I mean, that's because Mormons respect authority. Let's face it. The core principle of Mormonism in 2022 is authority.
Yeah.
It's more than Jesus. More than Jesus.
That's all that is left.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have authority, there's no church.
Yeah. And so if the family members of those in authority or those in authority don't speak out,
yeah,
you know, and you know, we always get this is like, do you think Uchtdorf will ever apostatize? Do you think, you know, there's always this like, will one of them ever defect kind of thing?
And I don't think that's ever going to happen. And there's many reasons for thinking that way, but I think what's more likely is for family members of general authorities to help change those leaders. And they're more willing to listen to a family member that has these issues than someone they have never met that writes a letter, because it's just not personal.
Mm-hmm.
But when they have a personal relationship with someone that's going through this, it does grab their attention. And that's just the human side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, all 15 people are very human. And I used to believe that they had extra help. But now I really believe they're doing the best they can with what they have. And some of them are more entrenched in it than others.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are trying to change the others to be not as rigid and and damaging as others.
Because you hear that even today in 2022 with things like the LGBT stuff, there's apostles that are like gung-ho, anti-LGBT,
Right.
like let's just say Packer or Oaks or maybe Bednar. And then you hear that there might be other apostles that are more
You're right.
LGBT friendly, like maybe Christofferson or maybe Holland or maybe some of the others, and that there's dissension in the quorum today. That would just make perfect sense as just humans.
Right.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just...
And Uchtdorf, I should mention Uchtdorf.
Yeah. I mean, there are great people.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty easy to... I think you probably could tell who was that apostle that I mentioned. And
yeah.
I mean, there's... I try not to... I don't want to call out anyone by name, but there's good and bad in every organization. And I'll just leave it at that.
I just Googled what year was Elder Bednar made an apostle, and it was 2004. 4 years before your dad passed, but I'm not putting you on the spot. Yeah, and my brother knows Bednar and says in many ways he's a great guy, like a really kind-hearted. I'll just say this, my brother Joel has interacted with all these guys, including your dad, your grandpa, and your Uncle Joe, and one of Joe's sons. But my brother said even Packer could be really kind and really compassionate. So we make caricatures,
right,
good or bad,
right,
of these men.
Well, and I've had a hard time because I know one of Elder Packer's family members, and I have a great relationship with them. And he feels the same way about President Packer as I do about my granddad. And,
right.
And yet there's that tension that I felt from my granddad and with President Packer that like I feel bad that was there, but I also feel, I mean, part of me feels defensive for my granddad.
Yeah.
And so I know there's lots of people that can take this with a grain of salt that I'm trying to protect my grandfather.
Yeah.
And I recognize that a lot of things that we perceive are with eyes that those that we love, we want to protect.
Yeah.
And I've wrestled with that a lot because I've also left the church, and I feel like I've gone through the 5 stages of grief with the church. And I mean, it's taken me 10 years to process things, and it's been 11 years since I started. And I'm now to this point where I feel like I've got closure. But I mean, it's a process, and those 11 years I've had to process things with how I view my granddad and how I can reconcile all that.
Yeah. So. One thing that I wish on your behalf, as someone who has made so many sacrifices from a family perspective for the church as a family member and an apostle, I wish that your grandpa had some best friend who other than your grandma who's passed away, who was still alive, like maybe someone who's still in the quorum that was actually really close to your granddad, and that apostle or whoever you could go to them and say, hey, I didn't get to know my grandpa as well as I could have. Can you tell me stories about him or things that I don't know, or details about things he cared about or thought about, or deeper things?
Yeah.
As just a show of respect and honor for the sacrifices you and your family made. Wouldn't that be great if they could fill in some of those gaps for you?
Yeah. Although instead of that, I would rather have them spend that time with their grandkids.
Ooh.
I like what's done is done on my part. And I've been able to get a lot of good stories. I mean, I do have, like, I can show my kids my granddad talking in general conference. And even leaving the church, I still like his messages. And so there are some good things that I have with him. But rather than dwelling on what I missed out, I would want those guys to spend more time with their kids and their grandkids, because you're missing out on things that you can never get back, and they will miss. And I mean, if your grandson or granddaughter has an event, go to it. Miss something for the church. Do something with your family. You won't get that time back.
Yeah, that's powerful. And Mormon Church consider just allowing these men to be emeritus at a certain point, just to time out and to enjoy their final years, be humane.
Yeah,
you know?
allow them to be. If family is truly everything, allow them to be family members. So.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Well, Greg Gerritsen, I've just loved every minute. We've wrung and squeezed every single possible minute out of your time here from the time you arrived until now. And I always end with like 1,000 questions still that I want to ask. But I think we covered pretty much most of it. So I thank you. What a wonderful time today. But mostly thank you for your courage, because it's hard to come on Mormon Stories ever. It's got to be a little harder to come on as part of the Mormon royalty kind of, culture. And you'll probably have maybe a little bit more adversity or reaction than maybe a lot of other people would. And so for all that, thank you for speaking up, for being honest, and for helping shed light that I know it's going to reach and help a lot of people. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for this platform, because my journey would not have been as easy without you and the resources that you've given the world. And so I don't feel like I've done anything that's big, that's noteworthy. I'm just a small fish in the pond. And I just want to say, I really appreciate what you've done for everyone. And I know I'm not alone. And I just encourage people to help support this great series. And if you can, please help Mormon Stories continue and shed light on what needs to be exposed and as well brought to the center. So
yeah, well, that's super kind. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. And
give our best to your wife and kids, and they're supporting you, because clearly your wife would have had to be, even as a partial believer, it's probably a lot for her to be able to accept that you're doing this. So thanks to her.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Greg Gerritsen. And come back anytime.
Well, thanks. Happy to help anytime.
Yeah. And if you're a Mormon pilot, ex-Mormon pilot, I want to hear from you. And of course, I get a lot of people who write me and say, John, can't you just interview regular Mormons? Why do you have to focus on ex-bishops or ex-stake presidents or ex-mission presidents or family members of authorities? And I just want to say we are going to keep doing just normal Mormons too. And I hope you can see why opportunities like this are also special. So anyway, if there are any other family members or people or general authorities or external authorities, or, there's always going to be a platform here for you, because it's just it's the lingua franca of Mormonism is power and authority. So we're always going to give you privilege if any of you want to follow Greg or others like Hans Mattson and or Roger Hendricks or others and speak out. You're always welcome.
I will say one of the reasons why it took me so long is because I didn't want to come on because I'm a grandson.
Right, because that's the problem to begin with, right?
Yeah, because you don't want to use that as a reason why you're heard.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and on the one hand I feel bad, and on the other hand I'm glad you overrode that.
It's an interesting dynamic that it's there. You don't want it to be why you do things, but it's also why things are like they are.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, Greg.
Thank you.
And thanks again for joining us on Mormon Stories. Please share this. If you value this type of content, you can become a monthly donor at mormonstories.org. Click on the donate button, become a monthly donor. We lose donors all the time. We can't keep doing this without your support. Thanks to everyone on the Mormon Stories staff and the board who make all this possible. Thanks to all the donors that make this possible. And thanks to all the listeners and viewers. Please share this. Please spread the word. Please be loving and kind and good to each other. And reach out. Comments on the blog, comments on YouTube, comments on Facebook. And feel free to email us at mormonstories@gmail.com if you think you have a really important story to tell. There's no way we could ever interview everyone who has a story to tell, but that's how I got in touch with Greg. He reached out and emailed me, right, Greg?
Right.
Yeah. So please always reach out at mormonstories@gmail.com if you want to tell your story. Thanks, everybody. Be kind to each other. Love each other. Shout out to Richard B. Wirthlin and his lovely wife. What's her name? Your grandma.
Oh, Joseph B. Wirthlin.
Sorry. Shout out to Joseph B. Wirthlin and his beautiful wife.
Elisa.
Oh, you said that, right. Thanks for all the wonderful things you did for the world. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone. We'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye.